Now, personally, there are two kind of companies that I really, really love. And these companies are defined by two important metrics, financial metrics, that I very often keep an eye on when I do investing or when I have to make decisions. First company is a company that has a very high degree of operating leverage. So this is going to be a company that has a high degree of operating leverage that is, well, very, very high and increasing across time. This is a profitability metric, but it's a very specific profile of profitability that we're going to talk about right now. And then the second type of company that I really like to keep my eye on, and that again is a very, very specific type of company operating in very, very specific types of industries. It's a company that has a negative working capital due to certain circumstances. So again, going back to our working capital, it's a measure of liquidity. And when a company has a negative working capital or strict working capital, it has properties that I find very, very, very exciting on the business side, and that for me has some very deep implications on not just the way that it's currently managing its growth and operations, but on the way that it's going to grow in itself. So we're going to talk about these two types of companies. So first type of company, what the hell is degree of operating leverage? Really, it's very simple to understand it, but it's very important to be able to diagnose it. So let me put it intuitively first. Whenever a company grows, it starts to generate more revenue. But again, generating more revenue is not the only way that a company can grow. A way that a company can grow is by leveraging better its capital and labor to make smarter, more efficient investments, and then converting that revenue growth into higher levels of profitability, right? So one thing that is very important to understand is that a company can scale in two different ways. It can scale by leveraging more capital, software, machinery, anything that essentially allows you to produce more outputs with the same amount of inputs, or it can scale by hiring more people and having more people working in the company. Now, usually when you do a capex, a capital outlays or a capital expenditure, what's happening is that you essentially incur a pretty high fixed cost. So you essentially spend a lot of money right now that's fixed, and that's happening at the very beginning. And then once you've done that capital expenditure, you rely on that capital that you've accumulated, again, machinery, software, whatever it is, to start multiplying, to start duplicating, to start generating an increasing return on revenue, to start essentially just leveraging or generating more profit with each incremental dollar of revenue that you generate. So that was a lot, and I probably didn't say it in the best way, but let me exemplify what I'm talking about here. So again, going back to our degree of operating leverage. Every time we increase the amount of revenue that we generate, so whenever we go, for instance here, we do essentially I think it's more than a 10x or like 100x from 16 to $1 million of sales. Again, the numbers don't really matter. It's just the principle that's important. What's interesting to look at is, wait a second, for that incremental amount of revenue that I've generated, did I generate a proportionally higher or lower number of EBIT, of operating profit? In other words, for every dollar that I generate in terms of revenue, do I generate $1, $2, or $0.5 of EBIT? If I manage to generate more than $1, so for every dollar that I generate, if I generate more than $1 in operating profit, well, it essentially means that I have a very high degree of operating leverage. It means that once I've finished accounting for my fixed costs. Like once I finished deprecating, my fixed costs, and once I've reached a certain amount of units that have allowed me to fully recover my fixed cost, my variable costs are so low because I rely so much on leverage, on capital, on stuff that is already paid for, that for every dollar of sales that I generate, I manage to generate more than $1 in actual operating profit. This is a multiplier effect. It's very, very powerful. This usually happens for software companies or capital intensive companies that have machinery that allows you to generate much more operating profit for every dollar of revenue that you get. It usually doesn't happen for companies that have very, very high variable costs, and that's really, really best exemplified actually by software companies. I mean, imagine that you build software to do something, and then you're running the software, and then that's it, you're done. You are generating output. Well, that software essentially provides you a infinitely small marginal cost, even zero marginal cost, so very, very low variable cost. And because of that, very, very high degrees of operating leverage. So this is a very, very important concept to understand. And what I can tell you here is that if I compute my degree of operating leverage here, I can see that unfortunately it hasn't been great. Although I managed to achieve a pretty good operating leverage here from 2022 to 2023. In other words, for every dollar of revenue that I generated here from 2022 to 2023, I managed to generate a significantly higher value of EBIT. So if I really look at the difference in EBIT over the difference in revenue, I can see that it's nearly 4 times as high. So again, very high degree of operating leverage. And this is because I have very, very low variable costs on that jump. I have very, very low variable cost. And really pretty much the only thing that I have is the fixed cost, the capital expenditure that we looked at last time, that is now being fully covered by the revenue that I'm generating. So again, very, very low variable cost and fully recovered fixed cost. This means that I have a very, very high degree of operating leverage going into 2023. But that degree of operating leverage kind of like goes away nearly completely by 2024. And that is because the jump in cost, the variable cost that I have, which again is set at 20%, is now catching up to me like an old demon. I have somewhere around $360,000 of a variable cost, which is a very, very high amount compared to the very, very low fixed costs that I have, right? So again, just like that cost increase, that variable cost increase was quite low compared to my high, let's say high fixed cost going in from 2022 to 2023. Now my fixed costs are essentially a joke compared to the massive amount of variable costs that I'm going to have here. And this is why my degree of operating leverage goes down dramatically. And it goes in the direction that I pretty much don't like at all. It goes into the direction of showing me that my business here relies a lot on variable costs. So it relies a lot on me doing things, essentially. Again, it could be labor, it could be, well, in this case, the raw material, for instance. It doesn't really rely on us having invested in machinery or software or anything at all that afterwards provide you extremely low marginal cost. So I pretty much hate it. I hate that my degree of operating leverage decreases. Now, let's go through another analysis. Working capital is essentially my my current assets minus my current liabilities, right? And more specifically, strict working capital is essentially the account receivables, so what people owe me, and the inventory that I'm building up, minus the stuff that I need to pay to people, the account payable and the deferred or unearned revenue. So here, what is essentially happening is that Nobody owes me anything. I don't have any inventory at all. I don't owe anything to anybody, and I don't have any deferred revenues. All of it is just essentially cash. I have a ton of cash, and because I have a ton of cash, I have a ton of working capital that I could leverage if I had, for instance, short-term debt like I do have here. I mean, it's very unlikely that you're going to have to pay back all of your short-term debt, directly. But if I do have to pay at the end of the year 50,000 K because my debt holders are asking me to do so, well, I more than have enough cash to be able to cover that. So that's fantastic. In that sense, the working capital that I have here kind of like allows me to sleep pretty well at night. But it's also tremendously wasteful. It's also a ton of cash that I am neither deploying towards operation scale up, nor that I am using for anything else, for capital expenditures, for instance. So my working capital is very, very high. It's not being used by anything. And so it's definitely very, very wasteful right now. Now, what would be a way for my working capital to start decreasing, to become negative? Well, imagine that now, instead of, let's say, pay all of my suppliers straight away, instead of that, imagine that I decided to start, building up a policy of paying my supplier within 90 days, right? Well, what would happen here, for instance, on year 2, if I decided to not pay my supplier straight away, is I would start building a credit line, like a 90-day credit line, or even like a 3 years credit line if I decide to not pay my suppliers for a lot of time. And because now I have essentially my account payable, I have essentially this IOU, like this kind of like me having to pay my suppliers at a later stage. I have essentially reduced a little bit my working capital. If I start really making massive amount of IOUs, kind of like really building up my account payable here, I will progressively reduce more and more my working capital up to the point where, for instance, if I have 2 million of payables, working capital. I have my strict working capital, so really the value of my receivables minus my payables. I have that value that's going to start decreasing my strict working capital. And if I have some unearned revenue in here that start accumulating, well, with unearned revenue, you can see that I will bring my working capital to even negative values as well, right? Like to values where I essentially don't even have enough cash to cover for that unearned revenue should I have to pay it back very, very soon. So these two lines, account payables and unearned revenue, are very important because they're essentially IOUs that allows me to have negative working capital. Now, why the hell would I want to have negative working capital in the first place? Well, let me give you an example that's very important. Imagine a company like a music distribution or Live Nation, like an entertainment concert company, ticketing plus organization of concerts and things like that. The faster I have to repay all of my suppliers and all the artists and all of the people involved in launching and creating concerts, the less cash I have available for my own investing activities. And similarly, the more time it takes for people to pay me, and so the higher receivable that I have, the less cash I'm going to have again for investing activities and for capex and for deploying new concerts, new tours. And so here, in a company, in a context like a a company like Live Nations, really what's actually pretty exciting and very important to have is negative working capital, because for every dollar that I manage to keep in-house in deferred revenue or in account payable, it's a dollar that I can invest in my own activities, in launching new concerts, in signing new artists, in doing all of this kind of stuff. Now, why do I care about this? Well, a company like Live Nation, for instance, as one of my favorite business model in the world. If you look at the balance sheet from Live Nation and you go into, let's say, detailed financials, and you look at the balance sheet, you're going to see that they have tremendous amount of unearned revenue, which is the one that I was talking about here. Actually, it's like pretty high and it's growing. Somewhere around like $3 billion of unearned revenue. Now, what the hell does that mean? It means that if you look at their liabilities, this unearned revenue, compared to their cash, for instance, just their cash or the amount of receivable that they have, it means that they technically have more revenue that they have already collected without having provided the service yet than the amount of money that people owe them based on their cash balances, their receivable accounts. Now, how does that happen? It happens because Live Nation does something very smart. What they do is they organize a concert with everything already set up. The financial plan for the artists that they're going to hire, the set that they're going to lay out, like all of this kind of stuff. They don't pay anything yet. They don't pay for the capex. They don't pay for the venue. They don't do anything yet. But they already sell you the tickets, right? So you want to go to a very demanded concert. You want to go to the Taylor Swift concert. What Live Nation is going to do is they're going to make you pay for the ticket when in fact they haven't organized anything yet in terms of the venue. Or the artist. They haven't paid anybody yet. They collect the cash, so they collect already the ticketing fee. They collect actually the whole value of the tickets, and they're going to pay that value later to their partners. That's why the payable is also pretty high. And because they've already collected the ticket value that you've paid for, they essentially owe you a service. They owe you a concert. And this is why the unearned revenue is very, very high. They have a ton of concerts that I lined up that people have already paid for. And that's going to bring, as we saw, their strict working capital and their working capital to very, very low negative value. It's going to be scary because it's going to look like their working capital is, their current asset is not enough to cover their current liabilities. So you could interpret it as a scary sign that something is going very, very wrong. But in that case, it's really not. It's just that they've collected already a bunch of cash from you guys or from me, and they just have to make the concert happen, which is going to happen, right? It's there is a high probability that things are going to happen. Now, that's not always the case, but in the case of concerts, Live Nations, it's fairly certain that they're going to be able to organize a concert, right? They're one of the biggest promoters and organizers of concerts in the world. So this is free cash that they have. It's essentially free cash. It's cash that they've already collected without having provided the service, and that they can now put to use to finance other part of their operations. And I love it. I love it because it's just like free access to cash with no interest burden on it, and it's a very, very beautiful model. Now, there is a way that this could go terribly wrong, right? Like, for instance, what happened in COVID. What happened in COVID is that there is a ton of concerts that they had to cancel. Now, this is terrible because they have to pay back the ticketing prices, the ticketing value to all of their customers. So now suddenly they've collected a bunch of cash, invested it, and now they have to pay it back to a bunch of people. So that's the worst thing that can happen for a company like Live Nation. But most of the time, when there isn't crazy times like COVID, most of the time this is free cash that they can collect and that they can spend to finance their operations, like purchasing more capital or growing their team. And that's gonna manifest itself in operating leverage if they manage to buy strong capital that makes their operation grows. So these are the two metrics, working capital and degree of operating leverage, that I keep my eyes very, very close on, and that I really recommend anybody serious about financial intelligence to start looking at.